So, as of now, where I am, school is about to start, I think on the 23rd, if I'm correct. And for me, tennis starts today. So, technically, I recorded this yesterday. So, yeah. But if I do sound, well, if I don't post a video, it's because I'm tired and yeah. Because I gotta wake up at such an early hour in the morning. But if that's why there isn't a video posted on that day, that is why there is nothing posted on that day. But anyways, here is part 2. So, here we go. The days quickly began to blend together, and your hopes of escaping began to dwindle down to nothing. You had been all over the place with Yona by now, always keeping an eye out for the room with the Tory gate, but there was never even a glimpse of it. Yona brushed it off to the side when asked about it, saying it in all her years working here, she had never seen such a thing. You saw many different types of yokai while being out and about, as much as you were. Their features ranged from almost human to nightmarish monstrosities, some as small as mice and others so large they couldn't even fit into the building. For the most part, they were harmless, the occasional one giving you a double take, but then they feared the master's rage if they actually killed you. Yona became somewhat of a drunk aunt and acted as your guide for the first few weeks, evolving into something alike to a friend. Even when it got to the point where you could have started going off on your own to finish your chores faster, you stayed by her side. She was like some great force among you all, always knowing how to deal with unruly yokai and plowing forward in her task. You had seen her throw multiple sacks of grain over her shoulder like nothing when you work in the kitchen. It was almost impossible to think of her as anything other than unstoppable, which is why it came as such a shock when you woke up to find her with a burning fever and unable to get out of bed. I have to get everything done. They'll kick me to the streets if I don't finish my duties, and then I'll be good as dead. She struggled against you and your attempts to keep her laying, telling how weak she actually was, because on a normal day the woman could throw you over her shoulder without a second thought. No, what you need is rest. I'll take care of everything. It hurt your heart to see Yona so weak and unlike herself. Pushing yourself will just delay how long it takes for you to get better. What? You can't even go anywhere without clinging to my side. She laughed at the blush rushing to your face, and in return was sent into a coughing fit. Whatever. You fought the embarrassment of her words and pulled the blanket higher on her shoulders. Standing, you dusted off your knees and made your way to leave. There's no better time than to learn than the present. Effin, which is... What the flip is my... Anyway. Pushing in the doorway, you glanced back and saw Yona staring after you with concern. Promise me you'll be careful. Promise. Sending her to your best reassuring smile and waved as you headed off to complete the ever-growing list of work. It was odd not having someone to talk to, even if all she did was listen as you rambled on. Being by yourself brought a whole new level of eeriness to the place you thought you knew so well. Even with your fear, you still couldn't slack on your duties, unless you wanted to be reprimanded by Chrono, who was head of the entire service force. It was a slow go of things. Work that was normally done by 2 people now carried by 1. Keeping on track required a brutal pace, and there wasn't one moment where you weren't rushing or running. The real challenge had yet to come. Taking a deep breath, you adjusted the cleaning supplies in your arms and stepped into the most important task of the day, Kai Chizaki's room. You had never been in there before, always left to do whatever task, while Yona made sure the place was sparkling, not a speck of dust to be found. Now it was your turn. The room itself was already very cleaned, and for the most part boring. With him being the next head of the clan and all, you would have thought that his personal quarters would have been a bit more extravagant. Not to say it was impressive by any means. Gods no. It was bigger than the entire service quarters. The shelves lining the walls, holding scroll after scroll, and an elevated platform is set in the middle of the room, holding a futon of the finest cotton with many lavish cushions, covering by silk comforters filled with goose feathers. To one side was a doorway you knew to lead to the room next door, his office, a smaller desk set before the window facing the west for his personal use. You got to work, first dusting each inch of the room with both a cloth and duster, while moving every object and getting in every nook and cranny. Next was the window and furniture. Wetting your cloth with scented soap and water, you scrubbed every surface until your hands cramped. Then repeated the process with the floor. Lastly was the futon itself. Yona had always carried these herself, mentioning how particular that Kai was about wrinkles. So, when you touched them yourself, you were almost taken aback how soft they were. You knew they were the best quality, but after sleeping with nothing but the coarse and scratchy wool blankets all the servants used felt like the clouds themselves were weaved into the fabric. It took you much longer than it should have to change out the sheets, letting the fabric slip through your fingers and allowing your knees to rest on the plush cushions a moment longer than you should have. When you finished laying the new comforter of royal purple over the freshly aired futon, you couldn't help it when your body seemed to move on its own. Laying down on the clean sheet, just as heavenly as you imagined it to be, your eyes slipped shut. As the running of the day caught up to you, you could have fallen asleep and never woken up again, and still be happy. You could have, and you almost did, and rising familiar presence flooded your senses. Jumping to your feet, it wasn't a moment later when the door slid open, revealing the man you had put so much effort into avoiding all this time. Kai stared with the same look of annoyance he always had, eyes scanning over the room with rapt attention, taking in every detail until landing on you, those eyes burning intent and content. It made you shudder. "Forgive me, young master. I'm leaving now," you bowed, collecting the old blankets as he did. "Where's the other girl?" His voice was monotone as he spoke. For a moment, you weren't sure if it was a question directed at you or one he was asking for himself. "She is feeling unwell, sir." He said nothing and stepped further into the room, head scanning as he did so while you remained frozen on the ground, walking around the room, your panic sweat the closer he got, until you remained kneeling, wanting to flee but unable to feel your legs. Eventually he stopped before you, his elevated geta, the only thing you could see. It meant he had been in your imagination, but the murderous aura he carried like a shroud seemed different than normal. "Leave." His words knocked you out of your stupor, sending a jolt of electricity through your body and sending you running. You kept the breakneck pace all the way until the moment you reached the washroom. Only then did you allow yourself to pause, leaning up against the wall, taking deep, greedy breaths while trying to calm your racing pulse. It felt like you had just escaped death itself, and in a sense, you had. The lunch bell went off, scaring you once again. Along with all the hopes, all the others, you rushed to get your less than desirable bowl of whatever and grabbing Yona's as well. When you made it back to the room, she was already awake, sitting upright on her blankets and waiting expectantly. I guess I'm the royalty now, she joked as you handed her the bowl. Unannounced, turned to concern when you nodded in response, unlike your normal self that would have snapped back. Is everything all right? You seem kind of off. You pause, unsure of if you should tell her. Causing her stress would only harm her rest, but I ran into him. Your voice was barely above a whisper, but she still heard, rolling her eyes. You're gonna have to be more specific. There's a lot of hims here. Was it Mimic? I know how you don't like him. Or maybe Chrono? Don't tell me he caught you slacking off. If I told you once, I've told you 1,000,000 times. Kai Tizaki. She was silent for a beat, and you thought that she would have already died. What? Grabbing your shoulders and spinning you around, she ignored your complaints and forced you to look her dead in the eyes. Her tone was dead serious as she spoke. Tell me what happened right now. Sighing, you went through everything that had happened upon entering the room, opting to leave out the part about laying on the bed as she would have curbed you for such bland, surely discreet of rules. Nodding aloud the entire time, she seemed more relaxed when you finished. It sounds like he was just inspecting the room. If he had let you go, then it means you should be fine, she sighed, handing you her bowl and falling back onto her bed. I'd recommend getting started on the afternoon task, or else you might not finish till dawn. You scoffed. All right, little Miss Lazy, I'll get started on our chores. Yona ignored the blunt insult, waving you off and going back to her previous endeavors in Dreamland. Being much more careful than you had this morning, you once again threw yourself onto finishing the list of things to do for the day. Yona would owe you a big time, that was for sure. Finishing the last thing needed before you could crawl into the sweetened bikes of your bed, you paused when you spotted Chrono approach. Dropping into a bow, you waited for him to pass by. It took you by surprise when you felt a hand grab your arm, forcing you to drop the scrub brush as you were harshly pulled away. Sir, what's going on? What did I... Silence, he cut you off, pulling harder. Your presence has been requested. What? By who? For what? Ignoring your question, he continued to drag you behind him, and the longer you walked, the more you recognized your surroundings. If your hunch was right, you should be right about shit. Struggling against the grip of the purple-haired man. I don't know, Chrono said purple hair, but okay. Haired man before you. It was no use, and soon you found yourself being thrown through the doorway of an all-too-familiar room. With winter approaching, it was already dark by the time, lights coming from a dozen candles that flickered with every breeze. Slim shoulders illuminated in warmth. Kai sat there, his back facing you, while slender hands wrote delicate letters on the table before him. Chrono approached, leaning down and speaking lowly before taking a position against the wall. Not once did he pause in his work, continuing to scribble on the paper in front of him and leaving you to sweat in silence. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he laid the brush down in its holder. Taking a deep breath and exhaling, he stood and turned to face you. There was a breath of silence before he spoke. Not just anyone cleans my room and lives. Unlike all the others dim-witted yokai here, I have certain level expectations that few can achieve. So tell me." Taking a step closer, the hairs on the back of your neck stood on ends as his voice grew darker. "How did some filthy human manage to do so?" You racked your brain, looking for any answer to give him or tricks hiding within his words. One slip up, and he would show no hesitation in killing you. My mother was always strict about chores. She liked it when things were clean." You managed to stutter out between trembling lips. "A woman with sense, I see. I assume she also taught you something else there is to taking care of a home, correct? How to cook, how to make tea, and wash and fold laundry?" "Yes, young master." You could feel your gaze as he trembled under watchful eyes. With a twirl of his robe, he he returned to his spot at the desk and picked up his brush once more as he began to write. "From now on, you'll become my personal servant." His words came without warning, taking a minute to progress. What he had said before your body went rigid. He was kidding, right? There was no way he actually intended for you to take on such a position. He hated humans. Surely he wouldn't want one near him so often. "You will clean all my spaces, including my personal chambers and office, serve me all my meals and fetch me tea, and wash all my laundry. Whatever I am, you'll be it morning, noon, or night. You will come at my beck and call. Is that understood?" Gritting your teeth, you resisted the urge to argue. You didn't want to be around this man to begin with. And now you were his personal little errand girl. Or boy, sorry. There was nothing you could say, though. He was the young master, and you were just a mere human servant. "Yes, young master. I expect you to be waiting outside my door with breakfast in hand at 6 a.m. Don't be late." Dismissed. With one last bow, you rose on shaky legs and made your way back to the servants' quarters. Yona was going to die when she heard this. That night, after everyone had gone to rest in their chambers, Kai himself turned in for the night, an unusual occurrence for the demon who often stayed awake late into the night, working on paper after paper and keeping everything in order. Tonight, though, he had something to look forward to. Careful not to crease the fabric, he pulled back the covers and climbed into his futon. Once he settled, he closed his eyes, inhaling the scent you had unknowingly left all over his sheets earlier. A scent he couldn't get enough of, acting like a drug and drilling his senses while allowing his mind to wander. Wander it did, back to the way you had kneeled earlier, trembling before him as you spoke, the way your lips parted and formed every word, how your eyes remained lowered, occasionally darting around and betraying your panic while hiding under delicate lashes. Your hair did nothing to hide your face, allowing him to read you like an open book. If your purpose wasn't already told him anything he needed to know. You were so fearful, so submissive, so perfect. It disappointed him to see you in such shabby clothes, delicate hands soiled and dried from lack of care. It would be over soon. He had decided from the point he walked upon you, bathed in the light of the sun coming from the open window, illusioning your form and making you appear almost as a goddess/god, while humming to yourself as you cleaned, a melody soft yet haunting. Even now, he could still hear it in the back of his mind. He fought with himself at first, unable to accept the fact that he have such unfamiliar feelings towards a filthy human, no less. But no matter where he went, your scent seemed to cling to him. It promoted him to follow you learning more and more as you went about your task in blissful ignorance of your stalker. Yes, soon you would be his. Then he could live out all of his fantasies he wanted. Just as you imagined, working directly under the young Chisaki was hell. If you had thought your chores before had run you ragged, they were nothing compared to what you were doing now. You were constantly running back and forth, doing daily chores required by him, such as usual cleaning and laundry. On top of that, he was also ordering you to do one thing or another, be it fetching new water if his tea became the slightest bit cold, or waking you up in the middle of the night to fetch him more ink from the cellar. Your free time in the evenings was taken away as he enrolled you in shamisen lessons, just so you could play for him whenever he wanted, the first few times of which were filled with insults as he pointed out every wrong note and miscounted tempo. You worked hard at it, and eventually his jabs quieted. Content with listening to the monologues you produced as he worked, time spent with Yona was cut almost to none, restricted to when you two saw one another in the halls and talking in hushed voices at night while everyone slept. It was the only time you were away from the golden eyes of Jizaki, and you cherished every minute of it. Foolish enough, you thought it was your last, when in reality your days together were already numbered. My lord, I'm here with your breakfast. You waited a moment, a short pause of silence before you heard him give permission to enter. When you walked into the room, he was at the same spot he was every morning, sitting at the desk with a book, brush, and paper in front of him. Moving said objects aside, you were given space to set up the tray, which held his breakfast in front of him. The side of the steaming miso broth and crisp salmon sitting next to the maple-soaked tofu had your mouth practically watering. The smell alone was almost enough to set off your stomach, which hadn't been filled since lunch yesterday. Missing dinner thanks to Shizaki's insisting you get on your hands and knees to clean under every piece of furniture in his office. It was still 2 hours until lunch. He would be served, though. So, biting your lip, you focused on pouring his tea before beginning a routine of cleaning. You started in his office, knowing that's where he would be heading after breakfast, so continued his work. You had no more than started wiping everything down when your stomach began to growl, calling out for food, and quite loudly at that. And pushing a fist into the disobedient organ, you tried to keep it from making any more noises as you continued to work. There was no stopping its cries, however, as they continued to growl increasingly louder. All the while, you tried to ignore the sharp pain and nausea that came along with them. Oh. Sorry. Ooh. Little mouse, you jumped at the sound of his voice from the other room, cringing at the nickname he had given you. Just another deeming thing he insisted on calling you rather than your name, or even just simple as servant, which would have been more preferable. This just made you feel more kind of a pet, and you had suspected the name came from the fact that how weak you were compared to everyone else in the building, compared to how filthy he found you. And dropping your things, you returned to his room, bowing. A glance at his plate showed he hadn't touched anything yet, despite having chopsticks already in hand. Was there a problem with the food? He had never complained about it before. What is it you request, young master? Truly silently, he beckoned you over. Taking a step closer, you were surprised when he noticed you, motioned for you to come closer still. But by the time you had stepped closer enough for his satisfaction, you were right next to him, almost touching. You practically made you nervous, as you only the only people who ever got this close to him was never alive for much longer. Motivation for you to get Neil, you did so. Mind spinning for what he was possibly want. The food. Has it been tested? His question came out of the blue. The only time food was tested before any of the nobles ate it. It was when it was prepared by someone other than the head chef. For him to ask that would have been a stupid question, though you would have never told him that. I'm sorry. I did not know you wanted it done. I'll fetch a tester at once and... No need. He cut you off, stopping you mid-rise. But, sir, I thought you said you wanted it tested. You were genuinely confused on what to do. Did he want it tested or not? How dim are you? By the time you get back, my food will be cold and unenjoyable. That's what I have you here for. Wait, he expected you to do it? But what if it was actually poisoned? Sir, you stuttered out. I don't think I should. His brows went high in surprise, head tilting it to the side. Oh, so you would rather me be poisoned? No, not at all. Frantically waving your hands in front of him, you tried to think of a way out. This is an order from me. Refusing means disobedience, and disobedience means punishment. Would you rather that? His eyes narrowed, and while it could have been your imagination, you could have swore there was a tone of hope, excitement, laced under his words. Shoulders dropping, you gave up. No, sir. Good. Turning to his plate, he picked up a piece of salmon with his chopsticks and held it before you. Open, he ordered. You did so, allowing him to place a piece of fish in your mouth. As soon as it touched your tongue, flavor exploded all your taste buds in such a way that it was almost painful. After weeks of having nothing more than bland rice and bitter sludge, the taste of such a well-prepared piece of meat felt like a balm. Closing your eyes, you let out a small moan as you savored it. You intensely regretted your action as you felt Chisaki stiffen. I'm sorry, sir. Your face buried with embarrassment. God, how could you make such a noise in front of him? It just slipped out. He didn't react how you expected, blinking twice before his body relaxed once again. To be expected. It must taste better than what the kitchen serves. Yeah, it's not the greatest. The words were out of your mouth before you knew it. It seemed as if you truly did have a death wish today. I mean, you quickly corrected yourself, hoping he would let it slide. Master is kind to provide us with food and shelter. Anything he gives us, we graciously accept. Chisaki was silent, looking at his food in through once again. I can see, it's fine. You may return to your work. Thankfully for the dismissal, you were quick to rush back to the office and continue with your duties. The entire time, the taste of the salmon remained on your tongue, like a haunting memory, reminding you of something you would have never have again. When lunch came around, the taste you had grown used to came back full force, putting you further into depression. Well, when you returned to the kitchen and grabbed Chisaki's lunch, you were all then tempted to sneak a piece, hardly able to restrain yourself. Turns out there was no need to. As the practice from earlier was repeated, Chisaki having you taste his food, glancing carefully, watching for any signs of distress before dismissing you. It continued for 2 weeks, evolving from him having you taste his food to being allowed to eat what was left over as well, claiming it would just create unnecessary work and food waste for the kitchen. Chrono had almost exploded when finding out. You expect me to walk around with someone who looks to be on the verge of death? What would that say of the Chisaki house? Her conditions have improved along with her performance. Besides, look at this. He grabbed a strand of your hair-colored locks, twisting it between his fingers as he examined them. Much healthier looking. Still a bit dirty, though. The next day, you were put on daily
baths at Chizakai's instructions, as well as giving new clothes of finer material, matching closer to his own robes. In all this time, you noticed him become more invasive of your personal space. Touches were so rare, but often he would sit far closer than any normal person would do to a servant, insisting you stay by his side whenever you weren't specifically doing something. There were even times when the boundaries were pushed even further, bordering on creepy. The other day, you had been reaching for a book on the top shelf, stretching on your toes as high as you could, with your fingers barely scratching it. Just as you had been about to give up, you felt something, or rather someone, brush up against your back. It was Chisaki, reaching above you to grab the high item, sandwiching you between his own body, and the shelf. The heat of his skin seeped through his clothes and onto your own, almost burning how high the Oni's temperature ran. Lean muscles stretched under soft silk. As he stretched, pausing a moment before bringing his arm back down, his breath tickled the nape of your neck as he spoke, sending goosebumps racing along your skin. Foolish little mouse. It's almost like you're trying to show how helpless you are. Book in hand, he headed back to his desk. Similar occurrences followed, putting you on edge and left you anxious about the next time it would happen. You should have taken notice, recognizing the signs before it was too late, but you didn't, too accompanied with staying alive and working around Chizakai's mood swings and increasing possessiveness. The worst was still yet to come. Effin, correct? Looking up from the tray you had been loading with the kettle and cup for Chisaki's afternoon tea, standing in the doorway and blocking your exit was a guard you had seen walking out before. His towering figure and beaked mask making it hard for him to blend in with the elegant interior of the shrine. I don't think you remember me. My name's Rappa. It took you a moment, mind searching for some way you could possibly know this man. A faint memory burned in the back of your mind, right on the crisp of being brought back from whatever long-term storage it was in. Then it hit you. You were the man who found me the first day. Jumping back, you watched him cautiously. Why was he here now? Had he come back for revenge? But why now? He had plenty of opportunities to do so when you had been in the halls, alone and completely helpless. Hey, calm down. No hard feelings about ya, you know that? He flinched, hand coming down to cover himself at the memory. You won fair and square. So what do you want? Well, normally I would ask for a rematch and we would fight until I won, but I don't make a habit to fight women, especially mortal ones. Glancing at his hands, you saw how large they were, how easily they would wrap around your neck and snap it like a twig. One hit, hell, even a flick, could put you down for the count. But if he wasn't here to fight, what did he want? As if reading your mind, he spoke again. You've gained the attention of Chisaki. He treats you differently than the rest. I want to know why. So it wasn't just your imagination. His words confirmed it. Now you were left with the same question as him. Your guess is as good as mine. I honestly thought the man hated me. Picking up the tray, you made to exit before the water got cold and you were sent back again. As you approached Rappa in the doorway, he stepped aside, letting you pass. Before you could get far, he stopped you, placing a hand on your shoulder, prompting you to turn around. You're different from the other humans I've met. You've earned my respect. If you ever need anything, just let me know. Giving you a squeeze, he He turned and walked away, with hulking frame disappeared around the corner, out of sight. Shaking the oddness of the encounter from your mind, you returned once again to the room of your tormentor. He was still at his desk, sitting just as he had been when you had left, still writing. It was a miracle he didn't have arthritis, if yokai could get such a thing. You approached, letting your foot hit the wooden step to alert him of your presence. Kneeling beside the table, you poured his tea and set it within arm reach. When you went to retract your hand, however, you were stopped as his own reached out and grabbed your wrist. There was hardly time to be surprised, let alone reach, as he pulled you across the table, slipping the cup of scalding liquid you had just poured and burning your skin as he pulled you into his lap. Young master, what are you doing? Silence. His voice was low and threatening, almost seeing and locking your jaw shut in fear. He yanked at the collar of your robe, making you frail and panic instantly. You found yourself on your stomach, wind knocked out of you from the force and speed of his movements as you progressed. How you've been flipped onto the ground with Chisaki now on top of you, his legs separated on either side as he rested on your lower back, with his hand gripping your wrist together painfully. Still struggling, you froze with fear as you felt his free hand grip your neck, nails lightly scratching your skin as he yanked your head roughly to the side, bearing his face into the crook of your neck. He took a deep breath, like a dog picking up a scent. Why do you smell like someone else? His voice was too calm for the current situation, putting some fear in your system as you realized how pissed off he truly was. Rappa, you gasped out while trying to veil and gain more air through his callous grip. I ran into Rappa in the kitchen while I was fetching your drink. Wrong answer. His grip grew tighter as he pressed your face further into the floor. If he didn't let up soon, you were going to pass out from either the lack of oxygen or fear, whichever came first, and you allowed him to touch you, knowing full well you belonged to me. I'm sorry, master. I'm sorry. I won't let it happen again. You were almost crying at this point, tears swimming and blurring your vision. Not that there was much to see from your current position. It seemed your begging had done it for this sadistic bastard, as he let up on your neck, allowing you to breathe, taking greedy gulps of air into your burning lungs. You could feel Chisaki shift above you. It's my fault for being too lenient with you. I should have known you would have need more training. Not to worry, though. The shifting of fabric could have heard as he shuffled through his robe. Sorry about that. Ignoring your struggles. This should do. Once again, you felt pressure around your neck, but this time it wasn't the warmth of skin. It was the cold brush of metal. There was a small click, and you were revealed of the weight pinning you. Scrambling away, you tried to put as much distance between yourself and the monster as you could. Key word, try. You got no more than 6 feet, and there was a small twang before the collar around your neck tightened, and you were being pulled back, right back to his feet. What did you do? Desperately, you tried to pull it off, only to be avoided with a shock, and not a small one either. All the while, his face remained impassive, watching you scramble to escape over and over, only to be pulled back or rewarded with a shock. Congratulations, you've just been promoted to my new pet. You will never leave my side unless I allow it. You will sleep, eat, even breathe by me. I will not allow any of the dirty vermin here to corrupt you more than they already have. I must already cleanse you of their filth as it is." You ignored him, continuing to struggle. He sighed. There truly was still much for you to learn. It's infused with my own magic, allowing me to control how far the leash is. And every time you get shocked, try to run and it will pull you right back to me. And as you've already learned, any attempt to tamper with it will result in a shock. Kneeling down, he grasped both of your hands in one of his, tilting your chin and forcing you to look him in the eye. Those cold, paralyzing eyes of gold, eyes that watched like a predator. You are my little mouse, now and for all eternity. Go to hell, you spout, the last of your fight leaving your body. Have you forgotten? He pulled you closer, yanking your hair and watching your eyes widen in fear, teeth gently scraping the soft skin of your neck as he spoke. We're already here.